We're recording this one, aren't we?
Record button. We are recording, Marie and Paul. The floor is yours.
Cool, thank you. So this session was set up as the road to carbon negative, and what I wanted to really share was the work that Paul and I have been doing on our carbon zero program, and then how we can kind of turn that carbon negative. And I will, obviously, we've mentioned B Corp a few times, so I just thought I'd just share a little bit about how this and B Corp fit together, because they are kind of aligned as well. So what I was going to do is just talk a little bit about the different scopes, sort of the process we've been through, and then really, and I wanted to kind of make it a bit of an open forum to talk about our next steps and how we can look at reducing our footprint and kind of get the input from the group, and then I say a bit on B Corp. So in terms of process, are we working? There we go. So we've basically worked with BEMA. They quite timely set up a little course on becoming carbon negative, and so we've been able to sort of fast track a little bit and pick up some tools and hints to build some sheets and some and the guy that's running it, he's basically had like loads of formulas and done loads of research and been able to share that with everyone, which has been brilliant. So there's 3 scopes that make up our carbon footprint. Scope 1 is our gas consumption, scope 2 is our electric consumption, and scope 3 is all about travel, hotels, and then other expenses. So we gather all this data together, we plumb it into a spreadsheet, including the commuting survey that we sent out to everybody, and then we get a sort of total of the amount spent on our goods and services as well. So this is all based on our 2019 data that you can see over on the right. I think it's fair to say that we used 2019 because it felt like a normal year for everyone. You know, we were traveling, we were moving around, we were doing all the things we would do in a normal year. And when we plugged everything in, this was the CO2 emissions results we get this little summary at the bottom. So that was our 2019, and this is what our 2020 looked like. So you can see really clearly there, it's about half the amount of CO2 emissions.
Yeah, so going back to the previous screen, what we were able to do, if you go back to the previous screen, I think it might be helpful to explain this to the team, is maybe the one before actually, sorry.
Yeah.
Is that at the top, you said, okay, on average, during the course of that year, we were 50 people, 12 months in the year. So that's 227 working days. How much of your time was spent working from home? Well, back then, people could work some of the time from home, and obviously in 2009. So that's, well, I don't know if this is the right screen grab now actually, because so that was average percentage time spent at home. We set out what that kind of was, and we could probably look on People HR and work out what that really was. So then you've got that as a benchmark, so that then when we went into 2020, we could say, well, look, for the first quarter, you know, we were pretty much the same, but then the other quarter we were almost 100% working from home. So we can then sort of ratio it down, and it pretty much means then for the first quarter we'd use those same travel stats, but for the next 3 quarters we wouldn't. So it's quite nice to have a sort of full normal year as our benchmark, and then we can almost then, without having to recalculate things too much. The other thing we had to do was sort of just average things out, because of course the cost of running Ashford, or the gas usage of Ashford, or electricity of Ashford versus the London office or the Leeds office, they're all quite different scenarios, and we don't really know those sorts of things. So again, this spreadsheet just helps you kind of average that out. You know, yes, Ashford is an older building without aircon. It might be sort of more expensive to heat than somewhere modern like the Leeds office was, and it's obviously smaller but per square foot, but equally it hasn't got air conditioning, which is notoriously bad and or whatever. So you just kind of have to sort of take a bit of an average. But what this, and maybe the next slide sort of shows, is when you actually start to look at it, where our kind of carbon, on the next one probably, the next area is actually in terms of the sort of the CO2 emission of 404. Oh no, where does it show which is scope 1 and 2? Was that on the?
That's on, yeah, that's on here.
Sorry, yeah. So quite frankly, a lot of the, unsurprisingly, carbon footprint comes from the traveling, you know, so the amount we can reduce our overall carbon footprint by what we do in the office. Yes, there's things we can do, but actually there's a lot more that can be done in other places. And that's what's been really helpful about this, is understanding, well, where are the big numbers where, you know, an X% change could have the biggest impact. There's no point sort of like making life really awkward for everybody or whatever, if actually that doesn't really move the dial very much. It's looking for the sort of where, certainly initially anyway, looking for where the best wins are. And you can see here, it doesn't actually give you, it doesn't actually give you the total of the carbon, does it? Here it's only just the amounts.
Yeah, so I think when we looked at it, Paul, it was this bottom figure, this scope 3, the additional goods and service, with this big bucket of like 800,000. Actually, that had quite a high carbon weighting to it, and that's all about our supply chain. Did you want to jump in?
The idea of the scope 1, 2, 3 is obviously scope 1 and 2 is the stuff that's kind of, I don't know, as an office, and their energy usage that we are in control of. Then scope 3 is energy usage, we're sort of is third party really, because it's stuff you're doing traveling to work or doing at your home or whatever it might be, which we're not truly in control of. And then equally there's stuff we buy from people, which is kind of third party, where we're not really in control of the carbon that they're creating. So what these tools that we've got have given us is the ability to use kind of what's considered industry standards of what likely calculation you could put against those things. Now, some of it is averaged at the moment, but one of our biggest things we spend money on, for example, is hosting with Azure. So that is just in as a financial figure at the moment, and a carbon footprint has been put against that spend. But actually, someone like Microsoft is doing lots of work at the moment to try and make itself carbon neutral, so that you're buying sort of carbon neutral hosting, if you like. I'm not sure it's quite there yet. So it may be that actually a carbon footprint isn't as high as this is going to say, because it's using an industry average at the moment. So we can do more to get more granular, but we almost wanted to understand what's the benchmark, what's almost our worst case scenario. So if we're trying to reduce it or at least offset it, we're being more pessimistic rather than over optimistic, I suppose, at the moment.
Sorry, Naomi, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slight deviation of the topic, but obviously if we've reduced our carbon footprint from travelling, are we also a more efficient business with our staff's time as well? Something to consider going forward. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. We are. If people are travelling 5 hours to go to Leeds and back in a day or whatever to visit clients, how efficient are we doing? Are we now? We've been forced to do everything on Zoom.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously,
new world, isn't it?
You know, there is that consideration as well, and that might form part of our strategy going forwards in terms of, you know, we don't just say, oh, we're always going to go up and meet face to face. I don't know. That's
I mean, in fact, there's elements of that. I'm jumping ahead here, but there's elements of that in the B Corp, because that's looking at environment and people and all the rest of it. And actually, some of the points that we get are down to what was our original flexible working policy anyway. You know, so the fact that people can work from home sometimes is considered a good thing. Probably to your point, you know, it's not just about carbon footprint; it's about a balance of things.
Yeah, leveraging the tools. So yeah, to come back, having gone through the whole process of sort of working out, get a little summary, and then what we are also able to do and have started to do is actually track in our little tracker document. We've done it annually so far, but I've actually started to do Q1 of this year, our sort of reporting period, our head count, and then we can actually show our where we're sitting, you know, on a much more granular level, and start to actually look at it more closely and day to day against our base and our savings. And we can set these up so that they're tracking by client or by project or by quarter or by team or by office. So for example, if we're pitching for a new piece of business, we could actually at the end of that say, we estimate this project is going to result in so many tons of CO2, and we're going to offset it by doing this. So that again becomes kind of quite a nice story as part of our pitch and sales process. So that's something else to consider. So these tools are all kind of available for people as well.
So as you can see here, we've got, okay, this is how much carbon you create, 404 tons, which, you know, is giving you then a sort of ton per person number of 8.1 and, you know, and then how many per day and all those sorts of things. So it's very easy then to say, okay, you know, this project's going to take 4,000 man days. So if, you know, using this, that's so many tons of carbon. So, you know, we're going to offset it. And it's something we could do, you know, within even clients as well. Quarterly now, we could sort of say, okay, in the last, you know, quarter, we've, you know, created this amount of carbon with the work that went on your project, but Sagittarius has you know, has offset that. So you can feel guilt-free about all the money you spent with us and all the digital, all the money, all the damage you did to the planet by doing that project with us. So I think it's actually quite an interesting way of thinking about what we're doing.
Yeah, and then also, so yeah, what I've then done is just taken those figures and made them a little bit more fun, interesting. So this was our carbon position in 2019. So we had an average team of 50. We spent 227 days at work on average per person, which resulted in this 404 tons, which was 35.6 kilos. But actually, what does that really mean? Well, that's the equivalent of flying nearly 1.4 million air miles. So that's what the team generated in 2019. In 2020, obviously that dropped because we weren't traveling so much. We were all working from home, so we weren't commuting, lockdowns, etc. So that dropped by about 48% actually in CO2 emissions, which is quite significant.
Because unfortunately we were still heating, certainly one of our offices.
Heating, yeah. Heating, lighting, but then also you're heating individual homes, people at their own homes, but you're not commuting. So, you know, there's definitely some savings there. And then for Q1 this year, obviously it's been a full lockdown, no travel, zero, nothing. And actually we're down by another 40% on our CO2 emissions per employee per day. So that's kind of where we are. Obviously all the data has been based on our UK team, but going forwards, hot off the press, yesterday we had sign off to offset with ecology, which for those of you that remember, Rob from Wirehive presented ecology to us end of last year, and the offsetting program that they run. So we've had sign off to basically put in ecology for the whole of the Remarkable group. So that will include the UK team, the team in Ukraine, as well as Tanasuk. It works out to about 81 people. And we'll actually end up offsetting more than we generate. And so to give you just to recap, in 2019, we were generating 35.6 kilos of CO2 per employee. With the ecology sign off and the program that we're looking at doing with them, we'll actually be offsetting the equivalent of 64 kilos per person. So that's almost double. So I'm planting around about 1,300 trees a month as a business. So annually, that's what that looks like. So it helps to undo some of the damage. And also it's realizing that we can't fully stop traveling. I'm not entirely sure people would want to fully stop traveling.
Do we actually plant the trees?
Ecology plant the trees,
yeah,
through
that's
the
what you're doing
programs of what
on your
they
weekends
do.
now.
I was going to say,
yeah. Signed you up. We're going to have you down big.
Look at my nails.
It's only 15,000 a year.
Oh, it's fine.
That's right.
It's fine.
You've just got to do 16 a month, Naomi. It's fine. We'll all be super fit.
From like a PR and a social point of view, can we partner up with them, get some images, tell a bit of a story?
So Naomi, I'll I'll go through it with you separately afterwards. But yeah, there's definitely a really lovely PR story.
Yeah, I was going to say,
have.
so this is used as a bit of a headline of 15,000 trees or whatever. That's actually not what happens. Is so, Naomi, you may have missed the presentation on ecology because that was before you arrived. We presented it on another occasion. So ecology is one of these kind of internationally recognised projects. I want to say the Eden Project kind of involved in the rest of it. So you pay a certain amount into it, and it could equate to 15,840 trees. But you actually can choose what other sort of projects you might want to fund. That might be a wind farm for somebody in Africa, or it's other things. But as a sort of a constant benchmark, you could say it's X amount of trees. And then it's really important to recognise. So what we're trying to do is, okay, this is how much carbon we've created. If we plant this many trees, that sort of eventually undoes that. Not immediate, because trees need to grow and do something before that can happen anyway. But okay, let's do more than that. So the initial reaction for us was, let's at least double it. Let's double what we think we're creating. So at least we're having a positive effect, hopefully quicker than just undoing the damage that we've done. And that's double what it was in 2019. So with obviously reduction almost being half in 2020, we're almost saying, well, let's go in at a level that's almost 4 times what we did last year. So now the challenge really is now to try and keep it as low as we can, so that then that differential stays greater. And there's a limit to how much we can do that. We've got to carry on and have our lives back as much as anything else. And we can obviously always increase that, but in terms of what we do from an offsetting point of view. But really, the most important thing is we also look at how we can reduce it. I don't want to just keep undoing the damage. Let's stop doing the damage in the first place.
Yeah, I just had a look at their LinkedIn page, and they put a video up 3 days ago saying that working with 4,500 partners and companies, they've planted 10 million trees in the past 20 months, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And that you basically, as a business, what you get with ecology, which is really nice, is you can actually see your forest growing, and you can see the trees that you've planted and when they were planted and how they're doing, and you start with little trees and then you get bigger trees and all that kind of stuff. So there's some really lovely interactive stuff around it, and for clients and for pictures and all that sort of stuff. I think there's some really good stories to be told.
Have we named the trees?
Not yet.
Dave, Paul, Ian.
I feel we digress.
So what they also do is then publish leagues of who's planting the most trees in sectors, so it gamifies it, obviously, and we'll be able to see if there's another agency, for example, planting more trees than us, which there are, because there's some bigger agencies. But and you can gamify it amongst your team as well.
Yeah. And I think as a business, we can also, if individuals want to plant trees on top, I think we can link it all together, which is quite cool as well. So if you want to do it for your family, for example. So this is what we're doing at the company.
Maybe I'll give my kids trees rather than Easter eggs then.
Sounds good. I like it.
I've just Googled it because I was curious. So 10 million trees would take up the same space approximately as Disney World in Florida.
It's almost, that doesn't almost sound very big, but Disney World is quite large.
Well, no, it isn't, is it? It's 20 million trees is 69 square miles, which you'd think it'd be more than that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's hardly the size of, let's say something like the size of Wales or something is going every day in some, so yeah.
And they plant mangrove because they're like the most efficient.
Yeah,
and that's the thing with the trees. So you could plant a load of beech trees in the UK and it would be lovely, but they'd take longer and wouldn't actually have the impact of, like you say, planting loads of stuff somewhere else, which you can do. The labour's cheaper, you can get it done. So in terms of the making your pounds go further, actually, it's why they choose those projects.
So mangrove also offers a lot of support from the farmers in the land as well, because it's like wind resistant and stops the rivers and that it coming up on the land, isn't it?
Yeah, so it kind of has all those sorts of fringe benefits as well.
So as a kind of company, we, you know, obviously we want to look at ways we can reduce our carbon footprint, and that sort of ties in with the electric, the gas, travel, hotels, purchases, supply chain, etc. And then alongside that, which isn't specifically about our carbon footprint, we've got, you know, the plastics, the oceans, the shopping locally, recycling, and purchasing eco products. So there's kind of two sides to this, and one of them is very much about the carbon footprint. One of them ties in really nicely with B Corp as well. So I think there's sort of a bit of a conversation to be had there. Paul did a little travel comparison just before we kind of talk about goals and thoughts and so on. And per mile, this shows you the sort of CO2 emissions per mile, depending on which type of vehicle you travel in. So,
and you know, what I thought was interesting about this when you look at this is obviously flights are often used as the sort of like, oh, you know, carbon footprint of going on an aeroplane, where actually the per mile a flight isn't terribly different to a petrol car really, but it's obviously you don't generally do 2,000-mile car trips, if you get what I mean. So therefore a flight will create a lot of carbon, even if per mile it's not very different to a car. Of course, that changes very much. If there's 4 of you in a car, then it's all shared between you, whereas if there's 4 of you on a flight, then it is 4 times that. So therefore flights don't really help. So there is benefit to sort of going in something like a car or whatever. As you can see, the lowest numbers on here are things like trains and national rail and underground sort of being on there. And of course, electric vehicles. Electric vehicles, you know, again, this is being used as the numbers they use to calculate carbon footprint in the calculators that we're using. But of course, something like an electric vehicle and even a train does create carbon, because somewhere else they're creating, you know, to create the electric somewhere or another to power these things. Plus, someone's got to build the car in the first place and the train in the first place. So to say there's zero under EV is a bit misleading, but it just sort of shows you when you start sort of thinking about how you travel. If you use this, definitely going by train, which is what most of us all bloody do anyway now, it is fine. But actually, unfortunately, the taxi, the last little bit, the last mile, so to speak, is the one with the black mark against it on this bar chart, certainly. So that's why I think we should all be allowed to ride scooters when we get to the other end, because
or
that
Boris
way
bikes.
we can do that. Yeah, or bikes. Yeah, bikes aren't on here. Cycling should have been on this
yeah,
chart.
walking, cycling, that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
So it's quite interesting. So I think I'm kind of conscious of time, but if everyone's all right for a few minutes, just really wanted to kind of get input. I mean, it might be something you want to take away. You know, what should we be aiming for? What should our goals be? What sort of reduction targets should we be looking for? And which areas should we be focusing on to kind of move forwards?
So there's a couple of just things I wanted to mention. So firstly, this offsetting bit that we talked about on previous pages. So now that starts this month, I believe, Maria, is it? It starts in April.
It does, yeah. As soon as I set it up, it's live.
So we're going to do that. So every person will be making, you know, they can sleep well at night, knowing that we're doing this on their behalf. A contribution is being made on their behalf from Sagittarius. So now that's done. That's which I think is brilliant and something we can shout about Naomi, etc. Oh, she's disappeared now.
She's set to go.
And it's now what we do to improve that. Really, you guys can obviously do your own thing individually and build on what we're doing. There's obviously we're out of control of what you do in your own home, but obviously we can help you understand maybe and educate. And there's all sorts of tools out there to try and help you reduce that. I'm certainly becoming a bit of a nut at home, lights and meters and smart stuff. Now I've got quite lots of little smart things now that just turn stuff off, just goes around that, you know, at certain times of the day, just to make sure they're not being left on accidentally. What can we do to reduce it?
Yeah, so some of the things are, you know, looking at, is it feasible to only book carbon neutral hotels? Should we be carbon neutralizing all our flights at purchase, even though we're already going down the ecology route? Should we be promoting cycle to work? You know, is that feasible? Should we be promoting car sharing? Do we, you know, are there stationery and facility suppliers that can kind of help us. I always think of like all the plastic wrappers that come with the Tesco shopping, for example, when we're in the office. So, things like that. Are there the ways we should be looking at that? And obviously Uber Green is now available in London, which helps on the taxi front. So, do we put in some sort of statements and restrictions on claiming travel back, if you're traveling for business, that you only, we will only pay if it's an Uber Green or that sort of thing. And as far as B Corp is concerned and the way it kind of slots in, within Remarkable Group now, we actually have an environmental statement as part of our mission statement in the Remarkable Group mission statement. And it's part of the VTO for Remarkable Group. And I think Paul is quite keen that we sort of disseminate that down within Sagittarius as well.
And what we're going to do now is all of our policies really. We need to document it for the B Corp status, and this is what I was saying earlier in AIS in the stand up that we kind of do a lot of stuff, but we haven't necessarily written it down. But it's just kind of like, okay, when we make a choice about where we're going to buy our electric from, for example, or where we buy our paper from or whatever, is it going to be mandated now that we will buy something that is greener or got evidence of a carbon footprint, a reduced carbon footprint, even if that's going to cost us a little more to do that? That's now that is part of that decision-making process, rather than it's just buying what appears to be the most cost-effective. We've also got to then do it with suppliers as well. So it's like, okay, Iconology, okay, Microsoft, if we're going to buy our stuff from you, what are you doing? If you're not doing something about what your carbon footprint, then we might choose to use a different provider. So that's that kind of more in that sort of scope 3 area. So there's areas where we can do that. And again, they may already be doing it, some of them, but we just don't even ask the question at the moment. Yeah. So that's where we've got more work to do.
Yeah.
I think it's really good. I think it's really innovative. I don't think any other, certainly not a lot of businesses are doing it this well. From my point of view, it'd be good to understand what kind of calculators there are in terms of a project that we have. We could say, as part of the pitch you mentioned, that we'll be offsetting the cost of this project in terms of CO2 to you. That would be really cool if there was like a Google sheet or something that we could use. But I think it's all really good ideas. There's obviously a line between making life difficult and actually offsetting the right amount of carbon. So I think it's really good.
Cool. Yeah. Any thoughts on areas that we should focus on specifically, or that you would like to see changes made?
Yeah, I think the office is obviously not in use at the moment, but when it is more in use, are there smarter ways of managing the office heating and electric? I know there's certain offices that we're not in control of that, but
in fact, at Ashford we've had Google Nest in for 5 years, because I put that in as something that would then, as efficient as we could with the the boilers and stuff that was already in place, make sure it was turning on and off at the right times, and it learned how quickly it needs to turn on and off and stuff like that. So I've had that in place for a long time. So that was sort of a simple fix, really.
We might not be in control of the specific office, but we are in control of which offices we use and which offices, i.e. we rent from, who we rent from, and how we do it that way. So we might not be able to control all of it, but we can certainly, choose our suppliers wisely, I suppose is the thought there. Cool.
Cool. Really
any
good.
other comments, any other thoughts?
No, I was just thinking, is there any appetite within the agency with people individually to do a bit more to be part of this? Because it is a fact that most of us are working from home now. So why are we not maybe looking at opportunities to have green energy at home?
So I've just switched my energy to full green, actually. So that was something I did at the start of this year, was switched it over to 100% renewable sources.
Yes, so have I, and there's easy options for that. I think that and the danger of that is that we can't, as a business, we can't impose things on people.
No.
Yeah.
No,
saying,
and
all we can do
I
is
understand
educate.
that, but maybe, I don't know, educate or have all opportunities aligned for people to make the choice themselves.
I agree. There are gains that we can make in the businesses, and that is about how we look at how we live day to day, how we bring things into the office, packaging, what we buy, who we buy from. And so, the green stuff doesn't come cheap. We know that, but we can make decisions along those lines and change the way we suppliers that we have.
Yeah, and I think obviously, looking at green energy for the office, and one of the things that kind of ties it in with B Corp again is one of the objectives is there a statement within your performance reviews which includes training on social and environmental impact? Is that part of mandatory training? Do people have objectives within their performance reviews that include a social and environmental criteria? So if you have that within your performance appraisal, if you have the training, actually you're educating people. So hopefully that's helping individuals.
It's one of those things.
It's at home.
It's sort of just how do we make it part of culture, really, to think more about those things first, and then that inevitably then changes behaviour, which hopefully then has a ripple effect into the personal life as well as everything else. Like you say, we can't impose some of this stuff on people, but we can certainly encourage and incentivize and educate. And so that's what I think, that's our place to do that. We'll do everything we can in the stuff that we're in control of. It's unfortunate, offices, particularly if we are going to be working from home quite a bit at the time, they're almost like the worst case scenario. They're big, expensive things to do, and then they're going to be sitting half empty half the time. It's just it's not clever use of energy sort of thing. But it's one of those things we'll have to look at what we can and can't do without.
Yeah. We're incentivized. Could you sound like that thanks page, like a client thank you? If you get a client thank you, it's worth like 2 trees of ecology, or one of the other badges is worth 1 tree of ecology. So then after like a month, you can have, whereas Andy will say how many thanks badges people got, as opposed to thanks badge, it'd be how many trees they've had planted. And you can have like a tree leaderboard over the course of a year and see who plants the most trees over the course of a year and so on.
Yes, a really nice idea. I like that.
Something else to report.
I like that.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no, I like that. That would be a really nice thing to do. So I like that as a nice idea. I had this idea that, because again, until you understand what damage you're doing when you do certain things, it's difficult to know what you need to stop doing, if you get what I mean. So that's been quite useful so far. And something like flights are clearly something that very quickly a family of 4 people flying to somewhere can create quite a bit of tonnage, if you get what I mean, in it. And I was saying, well, maybe that's a thing we could commit to, so that, for every member of staff of Sagittarius, that, we will pay for their carbon. If they want to go on holiday and take their family on a flight, we'll offset the carbon for them or whatever, so that, as a sort of benefit or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think there are creative ways where we can try and sort of do more. In terms of the offsetting thing, but again, it's ideas around how can we reduce what do we set as a mandate? You're only allowed to go and see clients so much, or whatever. I mean, it's kind of a bit contradictory to where we were before, where it was like we want people to be, we want you to be in clients' offices as much as possible because that's great from a relationship building point of view. But we need just to set expectations.
Yeah, I mean, you can change these targets, of course, into just contact moments, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the office.
Yeah, and I think exactly that, Sharon. On the back of, obviously we've worked from home pretty successfully over the last 12 months, and the tools are a lot better. The fact we've invested in Zoom for everybody and everyone has their own Zoom account doesn't mean you sort of feel that you miss that face-to-face contact. You miss the human contact and the touchy-feely bits, but actually that face-to-face time.
That can be a HR issue as well, though. So.
Sorry, yeah.
We're going to have only 2 touchy-feeling events every year.
2 touchy events.
Yeah.
The story of my teenage years, that.
Oh, we are recording, yeah, by the way, yeah.
Yeah, probably also. Might need to cut that bit out.
We'll take it in post. We'll take it out in post. Don't worry.
All right, no worries, mate.
Yeah.
So sorry, any other thoughts?
I know with Lando Green Parks I used to work for, we had also a green key certification, and they really had a nice, and they still have a nice section on the website where they actually explain what they do. So yeah, definitely this something, but for them it was probably a bit easier because they have physical holiday parks, so you can really focus on what you're going to do to make that client journey carbon free and more environmentally friendly. But it's a nice way to really show what targets you have. So I'll share that information with you.
Yeah, do that.
The Green Key is an international program as well, but it's not necessarily UK focused. So yeah. I'll share that information with you. Yep.
Thanks, Sharon. Cool.
Thanks, everybody. I need to drop off, unfortunately, but that's been a good session. Share the news, and if you weren't here live, then thank you for watching this afterwards.
Well, yeah, and definitely, Marie, if there's anything I can do to support, or be a bit more of a person to shout, then I'd love to be more
definitely.
involved.
And I think from my perspective, obviously with B Corp and with all the stuff we've been doing around the carbon zero and carbon negative, it's now about actually having a champion in each office or in each area or in different parts of the business that is monitoring and is looking for opportunities to reduce plastic, or to look at where a supplier is, or are there two people that travel from the same almost like the same place that could be car sharing, just things like that may be opportunities to make small incremental improvements. So I just thought I'd share the sort of B Corp thing. Paul mentioned this morning that there's 5 areas that you look at. The first is governance, workers, community, environment, and then customers. And so far we've completed our impact assessment, and now we're working through the sort of list of where we're going to focus our energy and our time. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about having performance appraisals, performance reviews that include an environmental or a social element to them, having mandatory staff training around social and environmental. And B Corp is very social and environmental. Carbon negative is obviously a bit more environmental. So they do work really nicely together, and I think it's a really good opportunity for us.
Yeah, and I think it would be useful to have champions within our agency to support.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Lovely. Well, thank you all. Thank you very much for coming. Well done, Marie, another stonking Hutton host. And I'll get up.
I'm off duty now.
Are you? Is that it? You done for the weekend?
That's it now.
Don't blame you, mate. I don't blame you. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. I hope it's been really useful. And just reach out. Joe, if you want to set something up after Easter, I can take you through the calculators. And I'll catch up with Naomi separately on the ecology stuff. If anyone else hasn't missed out on the ecology video and so on, then by all means reach out to me.
I think I haven't seen the survey or anything of that, so yeah, if you can share.
So the ecology, it's not the video, it's not a survey, it's the website and how it all works and that kind of stuff. So I can invite you to the session I do with Naomi if that's helpful.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
stuff.